So welcome everyone to our Congressional Candidate Forum this morning, which is made possible through the collaborative efforts of Kosair Charities Face It Initiative, the Blueprint for Kentucky Kids, the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, the Kentucky Nonprofit Network, and our Council of Agency Executives, soon to be known with our new name, the Kentuckiana Human Services Collaborative. This forum really is critical because most of us know and understand that it is absolutely essential that our sector must engage around federal policy issues. We know that a strong nonprofit sector is critical to safe, healthy, and thriving communities. Along with the human services field and our sector, we are one of three crucial components of our society, working side by side with government and for-profit businesses. We provide essential services with massive social and economic impact on families, public safety, education, and healthcare. We serve all ages and really focus on those who have the most vulnerabilities, including children, those with disabilities, and our aging population. The nonprofit sector here in Kentucky is the fourth largest private employer in our state. 1 in 10 Kentuckians, that's over 154,000 people, work for a nonprofit organization, and we account for $24 billion in expenditures invested right here in Kentucky communities. But more than all of this, our sector plays a key role in the democratic process. We give voice to the communities we serve and represent. We inform public discourse by increasing awareness and understanding of issues, by addressing policies related to our missions and our clients, and we hold decision makers accountable. Our communities, our state, and our nation are really relying on us now more than ever, and we must continue to elevate the voices of our clients all along the political spectrum, and we must continue to advocate for the communities that we serve. And so that's really, this forum this morning is so incredibly important. And I want to thank Amy McGrath for being here. It is my honor to introduce Amy to you all this morning. Amy is a retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel who is, of course, running for U.S. Senate here in Kentucky. Amy grew up in Northern Kentucky and graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy. She became the first woman in the Marine Corps to ever fly a combat mission in an FA-18 fighter jet. And during her 20 years as a Marine, she served 3 combat tours overseas and served as a congressional fellow advising a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee on Defense and Foreign Policy. She went on to serve in the Pentagon as a Marine Corps liaison to the State Department. And Amy lives in Georgetown, Kentucky with her husband, Eric, who is a retired Navy pilot, and their 3 children, Teddy, George, and Ellie. Amy, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. And Terry, I'm going to turn it over to you and Amy.
Okay, good. Thanks, Pam. Well, I just want to echo Pam's sentiment. First of all, thank all of you for joining us today. A reminder that this event is being recorded. That'll be posted by tomorrow on KYA's website. It'll also be a podcast. So especially if you're a CEO of a nonprofit, we want to encourage you to tap into that recording or podcast and share it with your networks, your board, your senior staff, because we want everyone to be able to take advantage of the conversation that we're going to have with the Lieutenant Colonel. Lieutenant Colonel McGrath, I want to just again echo Pam's sentiment that in the midst of a very, very busy moment for you, the fact that you're taking time to talk to Health and Human Services, kid and family advocates is a profound statement, and we really appreciate it. So welcome. The McGrath campaign knows this, and I want to make sure our participants know it. Our philosophy on these kind of conversations, not debates, conversations, is we're a big fan of less is more. So certainly the Lieutenant Colonel has been in settings where she gets to speak for 60 seconds and her opponent speaks and she speaks for 30, et cetera. We kind of want to do the antithesis of that, which is pose a few big picture questions and let her have the floor. So just so you understand, my role is going to be to kind of look at the clock, make sure we get through the interview as it's architected. But we're going to give the Lieutenant Colonel lots of room to riff and speak today. And she knew that going in. I wanted you to know that going in, so we all are on the same page. So, Lieutenant Colonel, I have a very strong bias that the best window on any candidate is around the influencers on that candidate. Certainly, as Pam mentioned, you have a pretty amazing life story. You've seen a lot of leaders, and you probably have learned lots of leadership lessons. As you think about those real life leadership lessons and the role that you would play as a senator, I'm wondering if you could share one or two examples of a leader that you would like to emulate, either from your own biography or from a historical perspective.
Wow. There's a lot of them. I think that the people that I respected the most, of course, I was in the Marine Corps for a long time. And a lot of my mentors were, the colonels and generals. But there was we had one sergeant major in my second squadron, my second operational squadron. And he just popped into my mind just now because of his tremendous integrity. He was a man who, when something didn't go right, he took responsibility for it. And as I think of 3 nights ago in the debate that we just had with who I'm running against, and Senator McConnell, I think of everything that went on that night, and I looked over at the man I was debating, and there was just absolutely no responsibility taken for any of the problems. It was just excuses. And I think about the sergeant major who I'm talking about, who, whenever there was something wrong, he took it on himself, like, hey, I'm the leader. I'm the one who's supposed to be leading. Yes, it was the sergeant or the corporal messed up in a big way, which, destroyed an aircraft or an aircraft engine or something like that. But I'm the one that is responsible for these Marines. And he took it and he was honest about it. And he would, present that to me, and we would come up with a plan to fix it. And I think about our politics today, and I think about what's missing. I think there's a lot missing, but I think responsibility is that if you are put in a position to make a difference, to help right now, and to do what's right for our country, and you do not take responsibility for that, and then you start blaming others, that's people are losing faith in our institutions and losing faith in our leaders. And I think one of the things that could really help is to bring that sort of, hey, if you're going to take this role on, you got to be responsible.
Thanks.
But there have been a lot of leaders, and I think the other person, of course, I have to mention is my mother, because when people say, who do you want to be like? It's not always the 4-star generals. I want to be like my mom, who did a really hard job, but loved her family, and is somebody who's tremendously always learning, and tremendously understanding of others. And that's the kind of leader I want to be in the Senate. Somebody who doesn't judge, but tries to make things better for everybody, who's wants the facts, cares about science, it makes decisions, takes responsibility, but somebody who has empathy. So, and and all of those traits my mother has.
Well, I appreciate your authenticity on both of those answers. You mentioned politics today, and I think one of the best analysis of causal factors of politics today emanates from former Senator Olympia Snow's book, Fighting for Common Ground. I think most folks understand that Democrats and Republicans both appreciated Senator Snow's bearing on many issues. And she has just the most common sense analysis which is that when she came to Congress, there were significant numbers of Republicans who were more liberal than the most conservative Democrats. And there were a lot of Democrats who were more conservative than the most liberal Republicans. Her analysis as she left the Senate was that middle ground consisted of zero, not just a few, zero. There was no Democrat more conservative than the most liberal Republican, no Republican more liberal than the most conservative Democrat. And obviously that paints a landscape that we all know of toxicity and polarization. A lot of your comments, you reference a lot about you don't care about whether the jersey's red or blue. So you're a freshman senator, and you show up in a place where it's still true. Olympia Snow's diagnosis is still true. What are some specific, not philosophical, but specific action you would take as Senator McGrath to fight for common ground?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have to look at structural change. And I do believe that that part of that change, and it's not just because I'm running against this man, but part of that change is getting rid of our senator and Senator McConnell, because I do believe that he has built this system the way it is. So I want to take everybody back. If you think about the passing of Justice Ginsburg, unfortunately, so recently, and take it back to her confirmation hearings. She was confirmed 96-3. Now, lots of people didn't believe in her ideology or didn't, lots of Republicans, but yet she was confirmed. She was nominated by a duly elected president and went through the process, and 96-3. And the difference is that was at a time when you didn't have the leadership of the Senate being Mitch McConnell. Because what he has done is he has polarized and made this so partisan that today, if you take a step back and recognize what is just happening right now, today, with the current nominee, we had senators who were saying they were going to vote for or against this nominee before they even knew the name. Think about how bad that is. 200 years of tradition and history. What's changed? The only thing that's changed is the leadership, and leaders matter. And so I think the biggest thing we can do, it really is get rid of him and then see if we can make some structural changes and get us back to where we have traditionally had a Senate that has been able to work. Now, some of the changes that I think we should do, term limits. I think we should look at term limits for the Senate and the House, just as a start. We already have them for presidential, but just as a start. I mean, nobody should be in office 42 years in that same seat. Nobody, not me, not you, not Mitch, not anybody. It's not going to fix all of our problems, but it's going to move us in the right direction. I don't think that's a red or blue issue. I think that's something that we all need to do. I also think we need to get the excessive amount of dark money, super PAC money out of politics. It's crushing us. And 2/3 of the ads right now that you see in this race for Senator McConnell are your dark money super PAC ads. And the problem with that is we don't know where that money comes from. It's unlimited. We don't know who he owes, to. We don't know what entity, what corporation, what country that money is coming from. There's no transparency. So I think it's called Citizens United. I would like to end Citizens United, get rid of that. But in the process of getting rid of that structure that we have right now, I think we should be looking at transparency. We should at least have transparency in dark money. We should have some restrictions. It's just out of control right now and hurting us. I think we need to expand voting rights. I think that's really important. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And it's something that I want to do every chance I can to allow people the opportunity to vote, because we're not living back in 1950. This 12-hour window on a random Tuesday in November, it actually disenfranchises a lot of people. So I'm always going to be somebody that wants to expand that. because voting is a right, not a privilege. I'm somebody that wants to tackle the corruption that you see in Washington. How do you do that? Well, here's a very basic thing. Make sure that anybody who's a cabinet member or a member of Congress releases their tax returns for the last 10 years. I just think this is something you got to do. I mean, if you're going to be running for public office, you're in a position of public trust. You ought to be transparent. You know, I served in the military to get a classified a clearance. I had to do like 45 pages of like my life story of everybody I lived next to and my finances and all that stuff just to get a classified clearance. And we have members of Congress that have the highest levels and they don't have to do that. And they don't show us who they owe money to or what their finance is. And I think that's really important for us to have trust in who is working for us. Other things that I want to do is sort of rein in the revolving door of lobbyists, members of Congress and lobbyists. And then, you know, because all of these things are really hurting our democracy. They're not something I'm going to run a commercial on because I think the average person isn't following this as much, but it's really crushing our democracy. And I think we can get back to a place where our institution is something we're proud of again, if we can do this.
Thank you. You know, many of the folks on this call before last February or March kind of thought Washington was over there and their nonprofits and health and human services were over here. Well, the pandemic blew that mindscape away. So since that time, we all have learned the important role that Congress has to play to help the most vulnerable among us, because that's really the folks on this call are champions for the most vulnerable Kentuckians. We have seen what Congress can do. We have seen what Congress apparently can't do or won't do at the moment. I'm somebody that I pay a lot of attention to Peter Drucker when he says that if you have 10 goals, you have no goals. So instead of listening to 107 things Congress should do to help vulnerable Kentuckians around COVID, what are the 2 or 3 priority McGrath items on immediate COVID relief when you show up in DC?
Okay, well, before I go into that, I totally agree with you. And actually, there was a report that just came out this morning that said since this pandemic and these benefits that have run out, we have 2.5 million kids in America have dropped into the poverty line just during this pandemic. So this is real. And just big picture, and no, not to throw in a big political speak here, but I think it shows you the values that we have. You cannot just bail out big corporations immediately and then turn to families and kids and say, you know, we don't have enough resources. It's BS. We do have the resources to be able to help people right now. And so your question to me is, well, what specifically should we be doing? We should absolutely be having right now a continuation of the eviction moratorium, but that also has to include help for landlords. So help for renters and landlords so that we don't have any homeless during this time, okay? We also need to make sure that we expand SNAP benefits. That's so important. We've seen lines for food banks. People just don't have the work to be able to put food on the table. So we have to help right now, and we can do that. I think we should extend unemployment insurance right now. It ended in insurance bonuses for people who have been thrown off their work, because that ends up just helping families. Another round of cash payments and helping schools, because schools, where there's $1.3 billion for Kentucky schools sitting on our senator's desk right now. And schools need help. We don't have the tax base. Talked to Governor Beshear with this pandemic, and we're hurting. And then also schools are going to have to adapt, as you all know, with Wi-Fi, with internet connection, with computers. I go around Kentucky Some counties, 25 to 45% of the kids don't have access to a computer and the internet, sometimes higher. They're not getting any education right now. So these are all things that we can do. And the last thing, I know you said 2 or 3, but I'm going to throw one more out there,
Okay.
is childcare. Our childcare centers are really hurting, and we haven't done a targeted effort as a country in helping them. There's a bill right now that is a bipartisan bill to help would require $50 billion to help childcare centers. And we all want to get back to work, but the childcare centers are, for those of us who are moms, we get it. You need them open and you want them to be safe. So we need to help them. There's 50% of childcare centers in Kentucky are at risk closing right now. Again, it comes back to who you're working for. And we as a country, I think, owe regular people and kids help during this time, not just big corporations.
Thank you. In what we all know is an odd confluence, COVID and some really tragic events that really began with George Floyd has spotlighted an issue that really should have surprised none of us, but probably sensitized all of us, and that was around racial disparities in every sector. So as just one example, even a cursory look at our kids count data as applied to the Commonwealth will reveal that little boys and little girls of color have negative results when it comes to economic well-being, educational outcomes, health outcomes, justice outcomes, the list goes on. I can tell you that every partner on this call understands that the fight for racial justice begins in nonprofits and county courthouses in Frankfurt for sure. But I would also guess that none of the partners on this call believe that Congress gets a pass. We don't want to hear rhetoric. We want to see targeted action. So kind of the same deal. What's the 3 or 4? So I gave you 3 or 4 instead of 2 or 3. See that? What's the 3 or 4 McGrath priorities to combat racial injustice coming from DC? Well,
first of all, I think you have to again expand out when you say racial justice. When somebody says, what are you going to do? I think of justice in this area as not just criminal justice reform. We absolutely need that. That's important. It's clear that we need this. And there's a lot of things we can do at the federal level. But we also have to look at economic justice, healthcare justice, as you said, educational justice. There's a $20 billion gap between majority white schools and majority non-white schools in this country. That's wrong, you know? And we've got to work to tackle those gaps, and we're going to have to do it at the federal level because a lot of at the local level, as you know, the disparities in wealth are so great, and the tax base, you know, the way we fund our schools at the local level. So we can make up the difference at the federal level, and I think that's something the federal level should do. But other things to tackle particularly the economic and healthcare disparities. Okay. One, $15 minimum wage. I think we got to do it. I think we need to do it over the course of a few years, but that we need to do it. And things like universal pre-K, you know, and it's just, maybe it's because I'm a mom and I get it, but these are things that 50% of Kentucky's preschoolers right now are not ready for kindergarten. According to studies, 50%, half. You know, we need to change this. Home ownership, from the economic, when you look at the studies show that the biggest way we give wealth, we get wealth, is through passing on home ownership, passing on assets to our children. And for Black communities, because of systemic racism, internalized and institutionalized over many years, home ownership has been really difficult. So I think we need to target minority communities, make it easier to buy a home, tax breaks and that sort of thing, and really target that because that's the wealth gap. Ending things like cash bail would help with criminal justice reform. And then, of course, with healthcare, we've got to fix our healthcare system and make healthcare more accessible, available to all Americans, and affordable. Things like the public option, things like lowering the Medicare age during this pandemic to 60, things like a Medicare buy-in plan for those that are 55 and older, getting prescription drug prices down. These are all things that I really want to focus on that I think could help close that gap and tackle from the federal level the racial disparities that we have.
Thanks. I'm gonna probably invite you to expand on some prior comments, but you certainly can add to it. And I want to talk about two distinct sectors. I obviously, as representing KYA, I'm going to start with kids. When we think about where Kentucky's kids sit, we know, according to the last Kids Count report, we're 37th in the nation in overall well-being. That means that we're in the bottom third. We know that 250,000 kids in Kentucky live in poverty. Fewer than 2 out of 3 Kentucky kids meet minimum standards for literacy at 4th grade. We know we have the highest rate of child abuse in the nation, and the list goes on. So one of the things that, frankly, folks who are going to vote for you and against you, but I hear a common thread, which is you're a good listener. So I'm curious, when you think about Kentucky kids, not what the policy brief says, but what have you been hearing on the stump and on the campaign trail? If your agenda is shaped by Kentucky voices, and it comes to kids, what are the priorities you're taking to Frankfurt or to Washington? I'm sorry.
What am I hearing on the campaign trail? I can tell you I'm hearing a lot about education, a lot about not enough investment in education. I'm hearing a lot about we do not have broadband. Our kids, we do not have access to the internet. So when the pandemic hit, that really just exacerbated a lot of inequality that was already there. And how are we going to make that up? Because we can't afford it. And this is, and I always talk on the campaign trail about infrastructure. But what I say when I talk about infrastructure, I'm not just talking about roads and bridges and dams and what we think about. I said, we have to have leaders that understand what infrastructure means in the 21st century. Yes, we have to fix roads, bridges, dams, water systems, sewer systems. 21st century infrastructure is broadband and it's cell phone coverage. And it is the future. It is the future for business, farmers, agriculture. It is the future for healthcare, and it is the future for education. What was, when I was a kid, the tools to success were a pen and paper as a kid. Now it's a computer and the internet. And a kid that does not have that is absolutely going to be left behind. And a region, a county will be left behind. A state will be left behind. And I would argue we are way behind in Kentucky already. And so that's something that is really important to me, because I think it can be done at the federal level. So when people say to me, well, what does that mean? It means that we need to have somebody with a vision in Washington that has the same vision that FDR had to bring electricity to rural Kentucky. He didn't say, well, let's let the private sector do that. If it's profitable for those CEOs, they'll bring that electricity there. No, man, he did it to the country. We did it together. We didn't wait for nonprofits to do it. We didn't wait for businesses to do it. We did it as a country. We built that infrastructure. And today, nobody says, well, that was a bad idea. No, that was a great idea because it lifted everybody up. Same thing with Eisenhower building the interstate highway system, lifted everybody up, lifted our economy up. We have to think that way about broadband and cell phone coverage because it is so important for the future. And then, with regards to kids, I already touched on things like universal pre-K and childcare, Head Start programs. Why is that so important, and why am I so big on that? I was in the military, as you know, and I had 3 kids in the military. And all of my 3 kids, because I had to go back to work for Uncle Sam, were taken care of by Head Start and government childcare centers. And I got to tell you, they were fabulous. They were awesome. And they provided me the opportunity to go to work and to serve, and also know that my kid had quality care. And I think that that is so important, and that we can do that as a country, and we can provide that sort of schooling and help for our families. So that's an important thing for me. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Just one quick follow-up, and then I want to get to the broader nonprofit sector. You built the case for, and I love the metaphor of both electrification and interstate highways. And I don't know if you have this because you're not in DC quite yet, but is that a shared commitment? Does that break down by party lines? Is it a more rural versus urban? What's your assessment on the capacity to
Can we do
that?
it?
Yeah, can you do it?
I think we can do it. So there was a study 2 years ago by Brookings Institution, which is a think tank. It's a kind of a middle of the road think tank. And it said that we could bring broadband to 98% of America for about $45 billion. Something along those lines. I can't exactly remember the exact number, but that was about the same number as the mid-range number that we are spending, or supposedly spending, on a concrete slab of 3,000 miles on our southern border. Okay, and when you think about it, we're going to spend money on something that, we can secure the border with drones, with better technology, and we're going to spend all of this money on something that can be defeated by a ladder and a saw, and yet we're not going to invest in ourselves. I mean, if you look at those two things, you're like, what are we doing? We should be investing in America and our kids in the future, for our economy, for our healthcare, for our education, and we're not doing it. And of course, when you think of that number of, gosh, 45 billion, that seemed like a lot 2 years ago, right? Really? Look at what we've just done in this pandemic. Mm-hmm. Look at what we've just doled out to big corporations, to keep them afloat for 3 months or 4 months. $500 billion. I mean, we got to think about we got to turn this and say, this is an investment in ourselves. That every dollar that we spend on things like this, on things like universal pre-K, on things like childcare, on our kids, on broadband, we get back tenfold, in terms of economic development, in terms of quality of life. These are good investments. And I do think that if we can get certain individuals out of office, that certain individuals who don't believe that the federal government should do anything because they're stuck back in 1989, they have forgotten what has made America what has made us in the last century the greatest economy the world has ever seen. It hasn't been just this, government laissez-faire is government's out of it. It has been a partnership. It has been FDR bringing electricity. It has been Eisenhower building the interstate highway system. It has been programs like the GI Bill, which made the world's most educated middle class the world had ever seen, because it was a program that everybody could be a part of, everybody who served, of course. But, and we've got to expand those types of ideas, because those are the things that made America so powerful. It's a balance. I think we're out of balance right now. We're focused too much on making money in the private sector, and not enough on this balance between public investment and business. Okay. And the last thing I'll say, and I know I'm going off on a tangent.
No, that's fine. This is a tangent interview.
We have, I think in our country, we have in some respects forgotten about the fact that public investment is a big part of our economy. It's a big part of how we've been able to have a good quality of life. And if you think about your iPhone, your iPhone, which everybody has now, almost everybody has one. And, a lot of people say, well, that's a product of the private sector, right? They put it together. Wrong. Every major component on your iPhone was public investment, from the GPS technology to this lithium ion battery, to the Siri touchscreen, to the cell phone technologies. Those were all federal government programs or research and development money that we taxpayer dollars put into this to develop these technologies. And then the private sector put them all together to make this great thing. But it's a balance is what I'm trying to say. And we're not balanced anymore.
Thank you. This is, you certainly have touched on a lot of this, but I want to give you an opportunity to riff a little bit more. As Pam mentioned very, very well in her opening, what I love about the group of folks who are on this call is folks with disabilities are represented. Folks with severe health issues are represented. The homeless are represented. I'm 70, so I'm glad that the elderly are represented. When you think about that broader health and human service component, you've certainly touched on a lot of that, but are there some McGrath pet projects that you want to share with partners that you go to Washington? Here's a couple things that they're going to see coming out of your office.
Well, yes. So one, I'm somebody that wants to protect our programs that help and protect those who are handicapped, who are need help, and those people who take care of people who need help. Okay, that's really important to me. I'm also somebody that wants, when you talk about helping everyone, I already talked about the minimum wage and how that's important and lifting wages. In Bowling Green, for example, you can't even get a one-bedroom house or one-bedroom apartment in Bowling Green, Kentucky, with minimum wage, working a full-time job. I mean, we got to do better. More affordable healthcare, I talked about. The extension of the earned income tax credit. We can lift millions of Americans out of poverty if we can do that. And then I would say, from my perspective, two other things, and you might, because you talked about the homeless and disabled and seniors. And my mother is a retired psychiatrist. So I've spent my entire adult life with sort of my mom always, talking to me about the issues of mental health in America.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And the fact that we are not doing enough for people that need help. And at so many levels that we have to change the stigma around mental health issues. And we have to do a lot more research and development to help people. We have to start making sure that insurance companies will pay for mental health care. Because, it's my mother who would say, look, I have a patient who needs, this patient's going to need, she or he is going to need 25 sessions over the course of a year for him to have somewhat of a normal life. And the insurance company will pay for 4. Mm-hmm. It's her, I could sense her frustration with this, and it was all about money, right? It was all about, and so we have to look at this and figure out what we need to do. I'm somebody that wants to have more help for police departments in terms of mental health. We're asking our police departments to do more than I think what they're trained to do, which is something that's come up a lot in the last couple months. Mental health providers in schools, that sort of thing. So that's number one. And the other piece is addiction, which is so important for our state to tackle. And what do I want to do there? One, protect the Affordable Care Act, protect the Medicaid expansion, because half of our fellow Kentuckians who are addicted, who are getting treatment, are getting it through Medicaid. So let's not get rid of that, okay? Because how are people going to be able to afford treatment? And we've got to expand drug courts. because we're not going to be able to lock ourselves out of this problem. And I think those are good ways of looking at how do we get people the help they need, holding big pharma accountable, of course, and changing the stigma around addiction. Those are all things I want to work on.
Okay, thank you. So this is not a nonprofit question, but there is no way that you can talk about this race, in my opinion, without thinking about the efficacy of the ballot box and the efficacy of transfer of power, if there is a transfer of power. So how worried are you about ballot box efficacy and what happens after Election Day?
Well, the good news in Kentucky, I think, is that we have a Democratic governor who came together with the Republican Secretary of State and came up with a really good plan for voting in Kentucky. And it's happening right now, of course, with mail-in balloting and early voting. And I'm really encouraged, at least with our state. I can't talk about the other states, but I think we have a good plan to get. Kentucky's never made it easier to vote than this year, and that's good. With the transfer of power, I mean, look, I believe in this country, and I believe that we will have leaders that will do the right thing. That said, I have been disappointed in the last few years. Leaders that I never thought would be would trample on the norms of our Constitution and of our country, the way that they have been trampled in the last 3 years, I have been shocked. So that said, I'm an optimist, and I believe that that our better angels will make us all realize that when a result of this election comes out, that we will accept it, and that we will do what is the American tradition of handing over power peacefully. That's certainly what I want. That's what I fought for.
Okay. So the McGrath term limit concept happens. And so I don't know if that means you're going to be leaving in 12 years, 18 years, or 40 or 43 years. So, but when you look
definitely
back,
not 43.
when you look back, can you summarize? Can you reflect, project ahead? What's the legacy that you're going to be proud of?
Yeah.
You're walking out the last day. You look back on your time in DC. What's the metric? What's the rubric that's going to make you proud of what you did when you're up there?
What I want to see at the end of it all is I want to see our country back on track. I want to see people be able to believe in their leaders again, and that we can start to solve problems. That if we haven't solved them all, that may be a given, but we have moved in the right direction. So I want to see a country that is working towards more affordable and accessible healthcare in a big way, that we have made a lot of strides. And let's just say 12 years, because I think term limits, I think 2 terms in the Senate is long enough. All right. So let's just say 12 years, we have moved in the right direction in terms of healthcare, more affordable, more accessible. The quality of care is the same, if not better, but the people aren't afraid of losing their health care. The people aren't afraid. They're not going into bankruptcy if they get cancer. They are not paying $3,000 a month for a prescription medication that costs $50 to produce. That's what we're seeing right now. So we have some reasonable restrictions on these things. That's what I want. I also want to make sure and work very hard for structural change. I want to get the dark money under control. Okay, I want to leave with some transparency in our system, that you all know who is contributing to political candidates. Everybody should know, okay, who they owe money to. And I want to make sure that that we have leaders that we can believe in again, that we're working towards equality, that we're working towards we've invested back in ourselves. After 12 years, I think we can probably bring broadband to 98% of America. I mean, we could put a man on the moon in 1960, what is it, 68 or 69?
68, yep.
Before my time. We can do this. I mean, seriously, we can do this. We have during World War II, we were losing 250 Americans a day. And we came together as a country and fought this war as a country. Here we're losing, 800 Americans a day, and we're still divided, and we're not taking this seriously. So obviously I wanted, the first alligator in the boat is get COVID under control, get our country united and beat this thing and mitigate it. And then beyond that, fix our healthcare system, fix our dark money political system, and restore Americans' trust in their leaders. After 12 years, I want Kentuckians to look back and say, well, I didn't agree with her on medical marijuana, but man, she always put her country in Kentucky ahead of her political party. I know she was doing what was right, or what she thought was right for her country and for Kentucky, and not her own power or her own party. That's what I want my legacy to be after 12 years.
Thanks. I'm going to do a little drum roll and set the Lieutenant Colonel up for the final question. But again, to our partners, I want to thank you for joining us today. I do want to emphasize that we have invited Leader McConnell to participate in a parallel forum. If we hear back, and if that happens, we'll let you know. Amy, I really appreciate, because my guess is that there's more risk in riffing than sound bites. And I appreciate your vulnerability and authenticity in engaging in really good, deep discussions today. And I want to offer you the chance to kind of do the summative benediction. So I want to be respectful of your time, but I'd like to invite you to, take 3 or 4 or 5 minutes and close us out on final word to those joining you this morning.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. And, in the crazy political environment that we have of one-liners and lies, I just hope that anybody listening today is able to take a step back and recognize that, those of us that are trying to make a difference, we're just trying to do the best we can. I'm out there talking to Kentuckians every day, and I just want to do the right thing for our country and for Kentucky. And we cannot change our broken system if we don't change the people we send to Washington, period. We've got a guy who's been in office 36 years, and 3 nights ago, what you heard on the debate stage was him basically telling Kentucky, well, I'm so powerful. Kentucky must vote for me because Kentucky's going to lose all that power. Really? It's not about your power, man. It's about our state. And how powerful really are we when we have, when we're 37th? How powerful are we when we have some of the highest rates of child poverty, the highest rates of cancer, the highest rates of diabetes, some of the lowest wages in the country? We have some of the poorest counties in the country, yet we have one of the richest senators. Enough is enough. And so I always tell people, look, this is the most important election of our lifetime, because we need better leaders in this country. The coronavirus has exposed the just really terrible leaders that we have. 215,000 Americans dead in 9 months. Think about that. And we still don't have a plan to tackle this coronavirus. Can't get it together. And it starts with leaders. So one of the things that I want you to know about me is, one, I'm always going to listen. You mentioned it earlier. Because if you're not listening, then what are you basing your judgment on? I've made misspeaks in my life. They're blown up on social media every time I make a misspeak. I'm not perfect, but I'll tell you what, I'm somebody that's going to listen. And if I'm wrong, just like Sergeant Major Sale, I'm going to say I'm wrong. Then I'm going to fix it and we're going to make it better. All right. That's what I want people to know about me. Always listening. Two, every piece of legislation that'll come across my desk, I'm going to look at it in terms of how does it help Kentucky families? Not how does it help the special interest groups or the wealthiest 1% or somebody that can, dump $500,000 into my campaign. It's how does it help Kentucky's families? And if you institute things like term limits and you get the money in politics out of control, you can continue to have more people that get to office that think that way, because then they're not beholden to these other interests, these moneyed, very powerful interests that are not the interests of our kids. Okay, that's number two. And the third thing that I want people to know, and I've already said it a couple times, is that my life has not been defined by red or blue. It's not been defined by being a Democrat or being a Republican or being an independent. I'm a Democrat, fine. My husband's a lifelong Republican. That's America. Guess what? For both my husband and I, it wasn't even until the last few years that those two words brought so much meaning to our lives. We didn't define ourselves that way. We defined ourselves as Americans, as people who loved our country, as people who wanted to do right. And so that's something that is seeped inside me. And that's why I always talk about country over party, because I'm a Democrat and I'm very proud of that. And I believe in the power of the federal government, and I believe in helping people, and I believe in healthcare and all of these other things and raising the minimum wage. But at the end of the day, I believe in my country. And I think if you have a clear contrast in this race between myself and Senator McConnell, what you saw 3 nights ago is that I don't understand how anybody in the middle of a national crisis would be ramming through a Supreme Court nominee when 4 years ago he said, let the people decide. And now he changes his mind for purely partisan power reasons that will rip our country apart, that will make people even more distrustful of our institutions and destroy what little we have left. It's unbelievable. And then not working on the very things that we need in this crisis. That's what 36 years in Washington gets you. And so my final statement is we just need change. We need to do better. I'm going to try to do my part, okay, to make that better. And I appreciate the opportunity. And again, the last thing I want to say is I would love to be connected. I would love to get into the Senate. My vision is to do this sort of Zoom, but with seeing all 87 of your participants and getting their feedback. That's what a senator's supposed to do. Okay.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel. Thanks, partners, for joining. A reminder that we really want you to take the challenge of getting this event out. Again, there will be a recording that you can access through KYA, a podcast. All of you are so connected to networks and boards. Use this as a lever and get it out. Special thanks to Pam representing CAE. Thank you, Danielle Clore for KNN, Ann Coffey for CNPE, Keith Inman for Kosair Charities, and all of the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children partners. Again, Lieutenant Colonel McGrath, I think I'm speaking for everybody. We really appreciate at this point in the campaign that you spent the morning with Kentucky's health and human service sector. That is more than symbolism. It's very substantive, and I, for one, appreciate it. Hope all of you have a good rest of the day. Thanks again, Lieutenant Colonel.
All right, good to be with you all.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.